the team on draft night that decided not to draft Scoot Henderson and instead opt with Brandon Miller?
Who wants
Well, at the end of the day, at least, listen. All this shit that Damian Lillard said yesterday, that didn't happen because actually the Hornets were in cahoots with the Raptors, and the Hornets said, all right, we'll take Brandon Miller because the Raptors, we know you guys are going to get Scoot Henderson from Portland because they're trying to build a contender around Dame. So, can't be too mad. In all seriousness, man, what the hell is that? Scoot was the pick at 2. We talked about it before the draft. And literally when we did our mock draft on here in our last episode, I was the only one that had Brandon Miller at 2, and it was to push Scoot Raptor agendas. But, we'll work with it. It's no slight to Brandon Miller. It's more so just Scoot was really just that good. But I still think Brandon Miller is going to be a very quality player for this roster. I think that they have a lot of figuring out to do. I don't think they're going to be too good next year. I think some things you need to see next year, you need to see Brandon Miller was the right pick because at the spot you got him, he needs to be a core franchise piece. He needs to fit well enough with LaMelo, and he just needs to be an overall good player himself. That's what you want out of a number 2 pick. Not that he has to be an all-star level player or something, but he needs to show that he can be a future all-star and should be in contention for Rookie of the Year given how highly touted he was. That should be the expectation at pick number 2, especially as the guy that you drafted that high over Scoot Henderson. I hate to say it, that's just the expectation that you have. Beyond him, LaMelo, we need to see some health out of him. He's had a lot of trouble staying on the court long term. They're never going to go anywhere if he doesn't do that. It's really the simplest thing possible for him. Just find a way to get your body right, whether you're working with trainers, however you can manage to do that. And I know a lot of it just does come down to luck, but we do need to see a healthy LaMelo if we want this team to go anywhere. And then the last really, really big thing is going to be this Miles Bridges thing. Sign the qualifying offer. He's coming back in, and he's going to bet on himself unrestricted next offseason. If he has a future with the Hornets, I think we'll see this season just throughout what his play is like and kind of what that fit looks like, and even just team morale-wise. I think we'll know by about trade deadline time if he's going to be around next year. If he can be what he was before all of the off-court stuff happened that kept him away for so long, I think he's a very quality piece for this roster, no matter what you think about him as a person. He's back in the league, and talking about it from just the on-court perspective, the way he fit with LaMelo before, if he can do that the same with the added dynamic of Brandon Miller, I think he could have a future on this roster and could probably fit pretty well. Now, outside of that, I think what this looks like is just a lot of these guys they've brought in, Nick Smith Jr., James Najee, Amari Bailey, all these guys are just going to be, let's experiment, let's give these guys some burn, and let's see who's going to fit the best around specifically Brandon and LaMelo and who's going to be the future of this team going forward. I still assume they're probably no higher than a 12 or 13 seed at best. And after that, maybe they get another good pick next year, and that's their third core piece if Miles Bridges is out. And it's LaMelo, it's Brandon, and it's some guy they draft next year. Not that they're going to be good this year, but I think they're headed in the right direction as long as Brandon Miller pans out.
Yeah, I didn't like passing on Scoot, but I don't hate Brandon Miller as a prospect. I actually really like Brandon Miller as a prospect. So they could have done worse, but I would have preferred Scoot, but it is what it is. They took Miller. I think Miller next to LaMelo, I think that's going to be a good sidekick duo type of thing moving down the line. Everybody knows I really like Mark Williams. He played really well for them, especially second half of the season. So they got their big. They got some building blocks. I like what they did outside of Miller. I think Nick Smith was a really good pick. He was somebody that was supposed to be a lottery pick before his freshman year at Arkansas. There was some injuries. Really like that pick in him at that value. James Najee was somebody that was like a fringe first-round guy. I think he's going to be very solid too. Even like Amari Bailey, I think he can carve out a role. So I think they did good in the draft, even though I would have preferred them to take Scoop. I still think they made the most of their picks outside of taking Miller. So even though Scoop would have been better, I'm still a fan of what they've done this offseason. They're in a much better position now than what they were, I think, like going into last year. Maybe if you can get off of like Terry, I think Gordon Hayward's on their contract too. So like get off of those guys, that would be even better. Get some more, maybe just like, draft picks, even if they're not like first round picks or whatever. That'll be fine. But they're moving in a solid direction. Still got some work to do. But like Gabe said, man, the main thing, LaMelo got to stay healthy because this team is only as good as LaMelo Ball is. And especially not drafting Scoop, you're banking on LaMelo being healthy for the long run. Hopefully he's the franchise guy for them. So, we'll see. But I think solid offseason could have been better, but I don't hate taking Miller. I think at least now you got a wing player that you can develop and hopefully depend on down the line.
First things first, I agree with you, Tyrik. I really like what they did beyond Brandon Miller in the draft. I echo the same things you said about Nick Smith. I'm really high on James Nagy. I think he can become a starter in this league. Behind Mark Williams is even better. Like that duo, I think is going to be really good. Now you got those two. You got Nick Richards. They've figured out their front court in a very, very good way compared to where they were just 12, 16 months ago. But the Brandon Miller pick, it's just frustrating. It's really frustrating, especially because they're at a point specifically with where guys needed to get contracts this summer that it's not like they needed a starting wing either. Just like they didn't really need another point guard. Like I've been on the record now saying I just don't see how PJ Washington, Miles Bridges, and Brandon Miller are on this team long term, because that means one of those guys have to come off the bench. And I just don't see it. Maybe it happens for this year. Maybe PJ comes back just because Miles Bridges is on a 1-year deal, and then either Miles Bridges resigns next year and PJ gets dealt, or Bridges just walks because PJ ends up being the starting 4. But I got people suggesting to me now today in the comments of a TikTok that they should put Miller at the 2, Bridges at the 3, and PJ at the 4. And why the fuck didn't you just draft Scoot? It's so stupid that that's the type of things we're suggesting now when you could have just had a Scoot and LaMelo backcourt instead of putting Brandon Miller at the 2. So that's the type of predicament they've got themselves in now, where they might just end up losing one of these forwards for less than would be their actual value if they actually had leverage. Hopefully that's not what ends up happening, but I don't see a way out of it because I know PJ Washington's going to be happy to just come back and sit on the bench again. Is he going to be a backup 4? Is he going to be a backup 5? Is he going to play that flex role again where he's flipping back and forth? Probably not, because he's proved he should be a starter in this league. I like the rest of their offseason, but that part was frustrating.
It's just, I think, a time will tell thing. As far as that whole, having a bunch of forwards debacle, I mean, PJ Washington is cool, but, if Miles Bridges is there long-term, I know which 2 out of those 3 guys I want long-term. You're just going to have to look back in 5 years and be like, oh, is Brandon Miller just cool and Scoot is this star? Or what if Scoot doesn't really pan out the way he thinks he's going to? Or maybe they both pan out and it's just oh, this guy just fits here better. We just kind of have to see. And it doesn't look great right now, but at the same time, it's not like it was this gigantic jump. I think everybody knew Brandon Miller was the 3rd guy if Scoot was to go number 2. So it's not like somebody who was supposed to be pick 7 per se jumped up and was all of a sudden number 2. It's almost kind of reminiscent of last year where, everybody thought that Jabari was the number 1 guy forever. And then at the last second, Paolo jumped up and ended up becoming number 1. And that last second jump proved to pan out. Now, will Brandon Miller jumping up at the last second to 2 above Scoot, will that pan out? I don't know. I will say it doesn't look as promising because Paolo really did just look that good coming out. But it's really just a time will tell thing for me. I don't want to be too harsh because we keep saying, oh, it's no knock against Brandon Miller. It's just the level of player Scoot is. And we don't know that Brandon Miller will not be that level of player. I will say he is a bit delusional when it comes to his predictions for what the Hornets will be doing soon. But as far as a basketball player, he still has a ton of potential and could be very good. So I do not want to jump the gun on hating this pick.
Yeah, let's just hope it's not like another Michael Kidd-Gilchrist type of situation where they took by far the worst guy out of the top 3 prospects. Just hoping for Hornets fans' sakes because they might lose their mind if that happens.
Yeah, let's sure hope not. That being said, after my negative rant, I do still think if all goes well and LaMelo can stay healthy, they can borderline push for the play-in next year. But I've also said that. Oh, for sure they can.
I think it's possible.
Why can't they though? Because the last time that Miles Bridges was on the team and LaMelo was healthy, they were in the play-in, and now they have a center and PJ Washington.
Because I feel like the East is stronger than it was at that point. I didn't feel good. Yeah, I didn't feel as good about the Magic. I didn't feel as good about the Pacers. I didn't feel as good about even the Pistons. The Bulls and Raptors and Hawks were all kind of shitting on, but at the end of the day, they have the pure talent and have been there enough and have won enough games to say I think they're still going to be above them.
I would still pick these guys behind the Pacers and the Magic, but if they're healthy and all goes their way, there's an avenue for them to get there. They probably get pissed on in the play-in just like they did the last 2 times, but I think there's a way for them to get there.
I guess I'd have to go back and look at the East standings. Excuse my
especially when you keep in mind how good they were defensively at the end of last year. Once Mark Williams actually got minutes, they were a top 10 defensive team in the league, and now they added a guy who should be a decent defensive wing in Miller, and Bridges back, who again is not a great defender but is decent.
Yeah, this year the 10 seed was 40 and 42. I feel like with the Hornets, they feel like a team that win freaking 36 games, make the play-in, and lose by
That's 1,000. Crazy. The last time they made the play-in, they had way more wins than that.
43, I think.
Or sorry, yeah, what season is it? Yeah, this season. Yeah, they were 43 and 39, and that was the 10 seed that year.
That's crazy in the East.
What season was that?
That was the 21-22 season. That was literally the last year they had Miles Bridges on the team. It's only a year removed.
They were 10 games out of the 1 seed, which is crazy.
They were, yeah. They were 10 games out of the 1 seed. They were 3 games out of the 6 seed. They had LaMelo Ball out for the majority of the season, and they had their leading scorer out for the entirety of the season.
All right. You know what?
And they were playing Mason Plumlee at the 5 for most of it.
Yeah. So I am definitely willing to give them a chance.
I guess I get the argument.
If they still have Terry, Gordon Hayward, those are still winning basketball players. So they could definitely sneak into a 10 seed, to be honest. And it's Detroit. I'm not sold on Detroit being a 10 seed. So you never know with even these young teams. Maybe Orlando doesn't take a step forward like we're expecting. That could definitely happen. Maybe Brooklyn's as mid as Gabe is thinking. That could happen.